we will get right into it. I am flying solo for the time being, so please bear with me. But welcome to Toolkit Tuesday. This is a monthly session that we do on the third Tuesday of every month. I will say that in December, it will be on the second Tuesday. At the end of today's session, I will let you know what the date will be, but we've adjusted next month's timing a little bit just due to the holidays. So today's Toolkit Tuesday is on doing business better, cooperatives and socially conscious businesses. How can you make money and be a socially conscious business? The triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit could be your solution. Peter Cameron is here from Ontario Cooperative Association, and he's going to talk to us about cooperatives and socially conscious businesses today. So quickly, before I hand the screen over to Peter, I will briefly introduce Innovation Guelph to you. I know a couple of you on the call today are clients, mentors, partners, and supporters, but there might be a few new faces on the call who don't know much about us yet, or are just coming to learn about today's topic. So Innovation Guelph is one of 17 regional innovation centers in Ontario. And while we are located in Guelph, we serve the entire region of Southern Ontario and have one national program. This means that while most of our clients are relatively close by, we do have clients in BC, all the way up to Nova Scotia and all across Northern and Southern Ontario. We work with our clients by supporting them through multiple stages of business growth, from startup to scaling enterprises, lots of programs and workshops, and even a big trade show, the Innovation Expo, which took place last month on October 21st, and we'll be back again next year, and it usually takes place in the fall time. So go next here. So here's Peter. So Peter Cameron is the Cooperative Development Manager at Ontario Cooperative Association. Peter is primarily responsible for supporting existing cooperatives and starting new cooperatives by responding to inquiries, providing technical assistance, and identifying funding opportunities to expand our cooperative development activities across the province. Peter joined OCA in April of 2011. Cooperatives have always been his passion, and he has extensive experience starting and working in cooperative businesses. He was on the founding boards of Silverwood Housing Cooperative, Guelph Food Cooperative, Guelph Co-op Council, and Sumac Community Worker Cooperative, Planet Bean Coffee. He was a co-op business developer and executive director of the Ontario Worker Co-op Federation between 1993 and 2002. Peter is a graduate of the Cooperative Management Certificate Program, sponsored by OCA in the School of Business, and he graduated from McMaster University with an honors BSc. He was a recipient of Outstanding Contribution on Co-op Award in 2004 and the CWCF Worker Co-op Merit Award in 2005. So we are definitely in good hands with Peter today. I'm happy to hand over the screen to him. Thank you so much for being here today, everyone. I will note that we have two ASL interpreters joining us today. We have Roxanne and Penny. They have identified themselves by ASL Interpreter 1 and ASL Interpreter 2. You can pin or spotlight both Penny and Roxanne to the top of your screen. They will be switching off every 15 minutes. We also have auto transcription enabled at the bottom of your screen. You can click the button on the very bottom middle if you would like to enable that option as well. I will field the questions through the chat box today. So if you have questions for Peter throughout, please pop them in the chat box and I will pop in and ask them of Peter at the appropriate time. But 1 to 1:30 p.m. is also our dedicated Q&A. So if you can hold your questions till then, that's awesome too. So over to you, Peter. You can take over the screen with your slides and get it going.
See my screen?
We cannot see your screen yet. There we go.
How about now?
Yes, we can see it now. Excellent.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, and no, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to Penny and Roxanne for the interpretation. I am with the Ontario Cooperative Association, and we're based in Guelph, and we are the voice of co-ops, English-speaking co-ops in Ontario. And we do everything from helping start co-ops to supporting and educating and doing lobbying to improve the environment for the cooperative and credit union movement in Ontario. So I'm pleased today to talk about co-ops. I hope I can provide useful information to you, something new, and I look forward to the question and answer period. But I'm going to give you a sort of a historical overview and description of how co-ops work, lots of examples, and hopefully some exciting new opportunities. But I always start with the Simon Sinek's golden circle. I'm sure some of you have seen this, and it's fairly straight ahead. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then the how and the what are very difficult to follow. And maybe you're not going to stick with it. So, why? Also, people have heard the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, thinking you're going to get a different result. And unfortunately, that's what's been happening with our economy for the last several decades. And what has it led to? Well, growing economic disparity, environmental crisis, political paralysis, and of course, unfortunately, we now have the COVID crisis. The disparity has become so great that now you have a situation where a handful of billionaires have more than half the world, have more money than half the world's population. And it's getting more focused. If you want the latest stats, go to the Oxfam site and you'll see it. It's outrageous. And I think a lot of people don't understand the amount of money that is out there. I always like to use this line that if I gave you $1 every second, how long would it take you to become a millionaire? About 11 and a half days. But if I kept going and giving you $1 every second, how long would it take you to become a billionaire? 32 years. That's the difference. So we used to be talking about, if I had $1 million was the song. Now we're talking about billionaires. And of course, in budgets, like in the US, we're talking trillions. So there's lots of money out there. It's just concentrated at the top. And if you hadn't heard, they announced it last week that at this point, Elon Musk is now the richest guy in the world, 320 billion. And of course, you've also probably heard that, where do we get support for programs, for public programs? Well, through taxes. But of course, there are people who are hiding their money, corporations and individuals, and it was released in the Pandora Papers that just came out, which was a follow-up to the Panama Papers. Climate change. We just finished the COP26. Depending, I like to think of the glass as half full, but it was disappointing what happened there. It could have been stronger. It needs to be stronger, but at least there are some significant changes that have come out of that. We'll see, though, if they are followed up. But it is, just look what's happened today in the mudslides in BC. That's partly because of the forest fires from last summer. And so climate change is real, and only by, I don't even know what you call people who still deny it. And then the political divisiveness. We're still stuck with this person from the South who is still fighting, thinking he's still president. And then, of course, we have COVID. And that has affected everything. It has exposed the contradictions in the system, the present system, the insanity of the present system. There wasn't money for a lot of education and healthcare and all kinds of programs. But all of a sudden with COVID, now there is, but still not enough. And the equity is still not there. So we're not the only ones in the co-op movement who are calling for change. Fortunately, there's lots of other groups that are standing up and demanding that the system change. Occupy movement, Me Too, crowdfunding, Yes We Can. And a lot of people, unfortunately, again, are questioning the role of corporations. That are they doing the right thing for the consumers? No. 85% of employees' morale and motivation has declined sharply. It does decline sharply after the first 6 months. And you've probably also heard that a lot of people are actually switching jobs or not going back to some of the jobs they've had before because of the conditions that have not improved. And it's a differential, especially because of COVID, people in the healthcare system. The stress is outrageous. So the business environment has to change. It is changing, but it's got to happen sooner. And what are the opportunities we're going to talk about today? Oh, and this other statistic that just came out this week, and that was in an Angus Reid poll, that young people have, they do not believe, and they are disappointed. Over half of Canadians under 40 perceive legacy of baby boomers, that's people like me, as negative. So, they are wanting and demanding change, and their presence was very strong at the COP26 in Glasgow. Okay, so how? What is the how? Well, I'm proposing something that's been around for years, and that is a different economic model that stresses people, planet, and profit. You got to make money. It's not about losing money or non-profit. It's about who controls the profit, who benefits by it. Is the wealth concentrated at the top, or is it more equitably shared amongst the community and the workers, and and that we do it in a regard to make sure that the planet is respected and people are respected. So people, planet, and profit. So the what? The way to do it is through a cooperative. And here's the official international definition, but it's fairly straight ahead. It's really people getting together like they have for years and solving problems, but doing it in a democratic fashion. And so co-ops are democratically controlled enterprises. And there's all kinds, and I'll get into some great examples. The other thing is that we have principles. And these are worldwide 7 international principles that all co-ops abide by, not perfectly, but that's their aspiration, that they are open and voluntary. It's democratic member control, one member, one vote. They believe in the people who do the work, member economic participation. They believe in the people who do the work get the benefits economically. Co-ops are independent and autonomous. Technically, a cooperative corporation can own a private corporation, but not the other way around, because then it wouldn't be democratic. We believe in education, training, and information sharing so that it's open and transparent, that the members benefit, that the workers benefit, that can improve through education, training, and information sharing. We also believe in cooperation amongst co-ops. I personally, I shop at co-ops when I can. I have my insurance with the cooperators. I bank at a credit union, and I believe in that system of people, planet, and profit. So try to follow it and follow these principles. Concern for community. A lot of corporations have that too. There's a lot of good, positive B Corp type and social sustainability type impetus by many corporations, but it's not part of their DNA. It's not articulated as part of their core principles. But co-ops, it is. So a little bit of history. Again, talking about how people came together to form co-ops. The first one that we sort of refer to formally is the Rochdale Cooperatives back in 1844. It was a company-owned town, basically, a mill town, and they controlled virtually everything, including the local stores and some of the workers said, you know, why should we buy? We feel that we're getting poor quality product, we're paying high prices. Why don't we start our own store? And that's what they did. They came together, they pitched in some money, and they bulk purchased products. And they this is their first board of directors. It was opened just before Christmas in December of 1844. And they, they followed Dr. King, the Dr. King of back then, who was a progressive person who said, the obvious. We all have to shop every day for food and necessities. Why don't we own our own store? Interesting. When they did that, they went to the local people in Rochdale, suppliers, and they tried to bulk purchase things and to supply their store. But actually, the local people who were threatened by the owners of the big mill wouldn't sell to these local people who wanted to start this store. So they ended up having to go to Manchester, which was the largest local town, to the market, and they literally wheelbarrowed back products, basic stuff, flour, sugar, candles, sort of basic stuff to supply their store. And there it is there. That's the original store. It's still there. It's now a museum for co-ops. And interesting enough, when they got there, they thought they had made a deal with the local gas company for lights. The local gas company, probably with the pressure from the company, wouldn't supply them, didn't supply them with gas. They had to use the candles they purchased to light the store, to open it up for their first sales. Well, they persevered, and within 10 years, there were hundreds of these food co-ops all over the UK, and it spawned the cooperative movement. So co-ops differ from other businesses by the values, by the democratic structure, and the way profit is allocated. And again, here's another comparison. And by the way, if anybody wants the slides or other information, we can provide that. Of course, there's lots on our website. So again, a cooperative corporation. Oh, and I want to stress this, or a lot of people don't realize, because again, it's not promoted. There are 3 corporate entities in Ontario. There are business corporations, there are nonprofit corporations, and there are cooperative corporations. And a co-op can actually run for profit or for nonprofit. And I'll get into, again, some of the different examples. So a cooperative corporation serves its members, and it's controlled by its members. And it is one member, one vote. And the board is elected by the members. And, it runs like any other business. And again, I'll get into that. Here's some examples. And, you've probably seen some of these names. Maybe you've shopped at them, or maybe you have insurance with the cooperators, or you've banked with a credit union, or had a co-op cabs in Toronto, or bought chocolate from La Siembra. I always like to point out the one right at the top here, Vineland Growers. They are the oldest consistently running cooperative in Ontario. They were started in 1913. And locally, the Guelph Campus Co-op was started just a few months after this. And so they're the oldest student co-op in Ontario. If you've, I'm sure many of you have seen this turbine. It was one of the first wind turbines in Ontario. It was put up at the CNE grounds, and it was started by the Toronto Renewable Energy Co-op. Co-op Cabs, as I mentioned, started in '56, owned by the owners. This is a very unique co-op. This is one it's a social enterprise, would be called a social enterprise, because it serves adults with various disabilities, and so they are members, and so are their parents, and it's run for them. This is a student co-op at the York University. They run a cafe. They've also expanded into selling fair trade organic t-shirts, and they're looking at other potential products. this for the beer lovers, is an excellent group in Kitchener. Together We're Bitter. There's also the London Brewing Co-op in London. So here's something that probably a lot of you don't know and is unique for the soccer players in the crowd. Barcelona is one of the most successful teams in the world. It's actually owned by the community. They have over 140,000 members and they pay an annual membership fee. And because they are more community oriented, they actually do a lot of team development and community development. And so very successful and very strong support from the community. And then for the North American football types, Green Bay Packers. A lot of people, again, don't realize that it is community owned. It was started in 1923. And they are so successful that they're the only ones that has never been sold. And interesting enough, the owners of the other teams now have passed a rule that no other team can be community owned or cooperatively owned because they don't like that competition. So here's the basic structure. As you can see at the top is the democratic function part of the co-op. One member, one vote. But just like any shareholder corporation, except again, one member, one vote, not if you own 50 plus 1% of the shares, you can control that board. And again, a lot of people have probably seen the public fight with the Rogers family and the infighting of who controls the board of directors. But it's, you could have a share in there, but you don't have a voting share like the family people. So in a co-op, they elect the board, and then the board sets policies and hires senior management, and which then hires other staff and implements the whatever the business is, and to run that business successfully. So here's an example of a consumer co-op, and that is a credit union, which it's a cooperative bank, and there are significant numbers of cooperatives. People have probably heard of Desjardins or Meridian. I mentioned Libro earlier too, Van City. They do and provide all the services of a regular, in quotes, bank, but they are owned and the benefits go back to, and their raison d'etre is to serve the members, not the majority shareholders. Guelph, you might have purchased their butter, their milk, whipped cream, all kinds of yogurt, all kinds of products. And these are the farmers got together and said, well, wait a minute, why are we just going to sell our milk to Parmalat or somebody? Why don't we be like any good corporation, except the benefits go back to them and also to the community because of their co-op values. Gailey Deer, very successful farmer co-op. And then the next model is a worker co-op. And by the name, you have to be an employee, a worker, to own it. And there are variations, but here's a good example of a worker co-op in Toronto, Urbane Cyclist, and they sell and repair bikes. They actually had the contract for the Toronto Police Service for their bikes. They've done very well this year because of COVID. So many people have had interest in purchasing a bike and needing service. And then the last model is a multi-stakeholder. And again, the implication by the name that there are stakeholders. And the example of the Together We're Bitter, the beer company, the beer co-op, they have worker members, they have consumer members, and they have other classes, in this case, investors. So, it's a flexible model. It's not as well used yet, but I think it has real potential because it has to be a win-win-win. So workers would say want the highest wages, consumers would want the lowest price, investors would want the highest return. To make it work, it's got to be win-win-win. and it's got to be open and transparent. So maybe harder to start, but once it's started, it's solid and has the support of all the stakeholders. So here's some stats about co-ops in Canada. I'd just highlight, I mean, it's pretty big business. It's not huge. In Ontario, it's not as well known. We actually did a survey of all the awareness factor of co-ops in Canada. And unfortunately, Ontario was the least co-op aware. Quebec being the strongest and BC probably second. But there's still 4 out of 10 adult Canadians still are members of a co-op or a credit union. And there are 8,800, over that now, co-ops in Canada. And lots of employees, generating billions in business, paying good taxes. And there are some seriously large co-ops that are part of Canada's 500 companies, largest 500 companies. And of course, a lot of you probably have heard of Desjardins. It's the 6th largest financial institution after the 5 big banks. And then the other part that I want to stress is that, it's again a worldwide movement. There are 1 billion members worldwide. It is, there are representatives on the ICA. So we're Ontario Cooperative Association. There's the Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada, and then there's the International Cooperative Alliance. And they are just about to have their annual meeting in Seoul, South Korea. So again, I sort of, and we can provide all these reports and statistics if you like, but why is the co-op model better? Well, actually, studies have shown that it increases performance, productivity, sense of job satisfaction. It helps to alleviate income inequality in the communities that they're in, and also obviously in the businesses. It's improved quality of life because people have more say, have more commitment to it, and it is based on the triple bottom line. So I think it's the way of the future. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it is something that if people knew about it, they would look into the potential of it and utilize them all. The Quebec government actually did a study because they have invested a lot in cooperative development. They wanted to keep jobs and money in the province. That's what they did. And there are 2 different studies. They looked at the survival rate of businesses over 1, 5, and 10 years. And of course, it's tough on business. You're entrepreneurs. It's not easy. But interesting enough, the co-op corporations, the survival rate was double private business after 1, 5, and 10 years. And again, my argument is that it's because people have a stake. They have a piece of the pie, either as workers or as community members, so they support it. It's not perfect. They don't all survive, but it's double the other. So how do you start a co-op? Officially, you need 5 people to start a consumer co-op. If it's a worker co-op, you only need 3. We now file our papers, our incorporation documents with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, mainly through Service Ontario. And so we're on the same page as nonprofit corporations, business corporations. Part of our job and part of our frustration lately is that we need more profile through NGCS, and they've just started a business registry, which unfortunately has got some problems, and co-ops are having trouble, or pardon me, it hasn't advanced to the point where we can do everything that everybody else can do on that site, but it's coming. If you want to raise capital, a lot of people in the private business, they'll go to the Securities Commission and they'll register to sell shares. Well, one of the benefits of a co-op is that we can actually use something called an offering statement. And we file that with FSRA, which is the Financial Services Regulatory Authority. I won't get into the details of offering statements, but if you want to know information about that, again, it's on our site. You can call us. And so, again, the Ontario Cooperative Corporations Act, there's a Credit Union Act. Federally, if you wanted to register federally, you have to actually be have offices and function in more than one province. You can still do any business you want. If you're registered in Ontario, you can still do business across the country, but you would then register in Ontario. But if you want to register federally, you have to be in 2 provinces. There are some businesses that act like co-ops, and that's they do a good job, and they're like promote good values, triple bottom line values, but technically you can't call yourself a co-op unless you're incorporated as such. And again, you do it through Service Ontario. So let's talk about where are some opportunities for business growth using the triple bottom line. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard about Uber, Airbnb, Skip the Dishes, groups like that. The question is, who really benefits? They do provide a good service, Uber, say, but the workers, the people driving the cars aren't getting the big bucks. That's being concentrated at the top, the owners of the apps, the same Airbnb, and all of them, TaskRabbit. Well, the co-op individuals, entrepreneurial spirit, they've said, oh, hey, we can do the same as these guys. And so they've started parallel type co-ops. So Eva is a ride sharing, is a co-op like Uber in Montreal that is owned by the drivers as well as the consumers. It's eva.coop. And then also Fairbnb is a movement that started out of Barcelona to counteract Airbnb, because not counteract, to complement and improve upon, because there are issues, and maybe some of you have heard about units and blocks of housing being bought up by Airbnb owners. Then the people who live in the area, and that's why it started in Barcelona, because then it became tourist oriented, and the people who actually live in the town and work there couldn't get accommodation. Fairbnb, check it out. And then Green Taxi, there's lots of green co-op cab type platforms. But here's a very interesting one, Stocksy United Photography. It was a group of 6 people that were frustrated by the returns they were getting selling their stock photography and not getting paid a decent price. So they started their own co-op, and now it is, I think about 1,000 members. They have revenue over 12 million annually. Half of that they've paid out to members, and so they get they sell their photography, but they also get patronage profits at the end of the year. It's doing very well, and because it is a platform, they actually have members in over 65 countries. They can do that because, again, it's online, and they have a class structure, 3 different classes. They have Class A, which is advisors and supporters, and then they have staff, that Class B shares, and then they have the actual member photographer providers, and there's almost like 980 something who are now members. They limited the membership growth to make sure everything worked well, but now they're opening and they're expanding and getting more members. Stocksy United. Healthcare is great potential for growth of co-ops. And again, COVID has highlighted the contradictions in the for-profit system that, you've heard of the long-term care homes, people, dying because they just weren't getting the service, and burnout of the staff because they were being, pushed to the limit. where if you actually set up a cooperative where they had a say, maybe a multi-stakeholder co-op, or in this case, a worker co-op, that these women have started in Peterborough, it is providing good service to keep people in their homes. And this particular model is actually run by women who used to work in the old system, but were frustrated by it, so they started their own home care workers co-op. Similarly, these are graduates of Algonquin College who are part of DSW, which is Disability Service Worker Co-op, and they provide support in, I think it's in Perth, that near Ottawa, and again, a great model for potential control by the people who actually do the work. There's one in New York. I should have put up a slide about that. There's one in New York that started years ago that now has 1,000 members and is controlled by mainly women, because it's mainly women who do the work. Home Care Associates. It's in the Bronx. All right, some other emerging issues. Business conversions. You know, the boomers, the aging types like myself, it's a demographic reality that business owners should be retiring, and they should have a succession plan. And a lot of them, unfortunately, Chamber of Commerce has done studies, Business Bank of Canada has done all these studies to show that people aren't doing a proper preparation for the conversion, and a lot of them don't know about the options. They think, well, I'll pass it on to the kids. I'll sell. Well, the worst case, I'll just shut down. I'll sell. I'll get rid of the assets. There is another option, and that is to sell to the employees. And employees who have worked there know how to run it. They might not have all the skills. They can bring in some other partners, other stakeholders, and they can keep the job, keep the service in the community that a lot of people depend on. So the jobs and the services that communities need. And I'll give you tons of examples, but here's a great site. Co-op Convert at the University of Toronto has done a very good report about how, and case studies of how good conversion has happened. Here's one that was in Northern Ontario. Some of you might be familiar with a little town called Moonbeam, which is near Kapuskasing. It was owned by an individual. He wanted to retire, didn't want to carry on the business, but the community relied on that, because they would have had to drive, a minimum of 20, maybe half an hour to literally get the milk and bread and basics. So the community came together and they purchased it and they upgraded it, and now it's a thriving small grocery store supplying the local area all year round. Locally, there was an architect. He was in his 60s here in town, and he wanted to retire, but he didn't want to retire right away. So he had some younger architects working with him, heard about the model, and said, I'll form a worker co-op and sell my business to them, of which I'll become part of that new entity. And that's what he did. And so it ended up saving jobs, but it's now expanding. But it was the first architectural co-op in Ontario and the second in Canada. The second one was in Montreal. And it's also inspired another group in Toronto that is looking at this model. Aaron Theatre, another good example of a community-owned cooperative. In a lot of small towns, there's independent theaters, but because of technology, the transition now has gone from film. We still call it films, but no, it's actually they're now all digital. And so this particular owner, he wanted to retire. He didn't want to spend the money to upgrade it. And so it could have been a, dare I say, on the main street in Campbellford, a small community, it could have been a burned out fire trap on the main street. But no, the community came together, they sold shares, they did some volunteer work, they improved the asset for the community. It now has first run films, they have speakers, they have music events. It is a cultural hub that they preserved in their small little town. And they've even, bumped up additional things with a green roof, and they've improved their marquee, and it's a real source of pride. This is another example in Quebec of a conversion. It was really the media, the newspaper industry has been, all over Canada, all over the world, has been really affected by technology changes. And the smaller community newspapers were suffering. And they came up with a plan to convert to co-ops and get community support and worker support. And they now have saved over 300 jobs, and they've maintained that service for those various communities. So there's 6 different communities at this point that have their own newspapers, but they collectively came together to share backroom costs, IT, bookkeeping, all that stuff. So a great example of how they've used this model. And now with the triple bottom line approach, I think they're pretty solid. It's still tough because of the technology changes. Here's another smaller example, but a very interesting one that this group in Kincardine, there was some of you might have heard of, there's a franchise called Curves, and it was I gather a very good program. But what happened was it was sold, the franchise was sold to someone who then started squeezing the smaller independent franchisee holders, like in Kincardine. And the woman who was the owner basically said, I can't do this anymore. It's not making money. I'm gonna drop it. Well, the women who were using the service said, wait a minute, we like this. They came together and they purchased it. And it's now, ever since 2015, ongoing success story. It provides the services they wanted, and it's a going concern, and they inspired another one in Fergus. So there is another fitness co-op, women's controlled fitness co-op in Fergus. And I imagine we'll see more things like that. So here's some resources. Again, there's so much more information now, both locally, provincially, and nationally and internationally. And so I encourage you to check some of these out. I didn't even mention the obvious. You probably noticed we have an upper level domain just for co-ops, .coop, and you have to be a co-op to utilize that. But it's part of our branding and trying to make people more aware of the model. And so I think I've rattled on for a fair bit. I know we're getting close to 1, but I really do want to answer questions or have other people offer examples of either co-ops functioning or where there could be functioning co-ops. And so Jordan, if that's okay, that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. That was wonderful. I personally really loved all the examples you included. They were a great range and very informative. We do have a lot of time for Q&A, or like Peter said, if anyone has an example or more information from it there, and we'd love to hear from you. You can post your questions in the chat box, or you can come off mute. I think Barbara might have a question. Do you have a question or comment, Barbara?
I do. Thanks, Jordan. And thanks, Peter. That was just a great overview of co-ops. My question is about climate change, and I'm wondering if you can talk a bit to how the cooperative model could be a climate change solution, because I actually, just when you were talking, I kind of was thinking of it that way, and not just the creating your own co-op or social enterprise and working under that, on that platform, but also supporting co-ops. So that's the first part. And then just wondering if there have been any studies globally, nationally, regionally about how co-ops could contribute to climate change, particularly obviously around sort of the more social aspect of it.
Thanks for that, Barbara. I mean, you probably heard about how General Motors shut down in Oshawa. Then, putting people out of work, the whole issue of transportation was raised, but they weren't at that point willing to invest in conversion of that plant to something more environmentally sustainable. Well, the workers got together, and with support of some co-op developers, they put forward a proposal to transform that plant into electric, environmentally sensitive or more sensitive vehicles and jobs. So it was a win-win. It was a people, planet, and profit proposal. It's still a struggle. It hasn't happened, but I think we're going to see more of that. There's a number of renewable energy co-ops, again, where people have come together and invested in and promoted, in particular, solar, but also turbines. And, they've also helped push the private sector to, pull away from gas and oil and promote the renewable energy sector. And we're trying to expand that. So, I see those as, very positive climate change initiatives. I also think it's a broader question. I don't know how far we could get into it now, but capitalism is based on unlimited growth. That, call it what it is, right? I mean, it is. I love the experiment that we did in high school. You put the fruit flies in a container, and they expand and they expand and they grow and they grow, and then all of a sudden, boom, they hit the limit, because we're in a limited environment. And yet everybody continues to talk about growth. Well, if you had a co-op, you can actually control your development, your business. You're still in the market economy, but you have more choice of what you will produce, how you'll produce it, how you'll treat each other, whether the community, whether it's the right job or the right, the right business for the community. You can't do that if it's controlled by shareholders in New York City or in Toronto. So the model, while again not perfect, operating in a market economy, it's still, you can get the input from the community as well as the workers, utilizing a model that still can make money, but it's more democratic, and I hope, triple bottom line. Don't know if that helped.
It does. And I think the social aspect is something that we don't talk a lot about. We talk with climate change, we talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but I think there's a really huge, I think there's a really huge social component to it as well, particularly in developing countries, but everywhere. So yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
The ICA has some great reports on what's happening internationally. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I know you can look at what they are doing in various countries around using the model for development and fighting climate change.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to go to two questions that are in the chat box, and then I'll come to you, Jennifer. I see your hands up, so I'll do our chat box ones first. So Maze is wondering if you could go over the difference between provincial and federal co-ops again, Peter.
Really not that much. I mean, in the sense that you have to, if you are wanting to open offices in two different provinces, you can use the federal act. My understanding, and we are trying, first of all, we are trying to upgrade the provincial act because it's over 45 years old. And the federal act is a little, is more recent and is a little, has some slight variations, but they're still similar in terms of the values and what you want to do. So it's just, the difference is that if you operate in more than one province, then you could register federally.
Awesome, thank
But,
you.
but you don't get the offering statement option in Ontario. That's right, I should mention that, because only in Ontario is the offering statement available. Gotcha,
awesome. And then we have Jim. Jim says, firstly, very interesting. He can see some real opportunities addressing social determinants of health in various communities. His question is, have you seen examples of co-ops where different types of groups and agencies, example, food-related, transportation, community services, etc., come together under a co-op model?
Is your question where all of those examples come together, or like in the food, there's a great collection of food, Ontario food. Wouldn't that be horrible if I forget the actual acronym, but food co-ops that have come together, and they also have started something called the Fair Finance Fund, which is helping various groups to food-related groups to get support. Doing a lot of work in Northern Ontario. The food sector has real potential for local food development and support. So that's, yeah, in that area, strong food. Housing, we're trying to create, first of all, there is a very strong cooperative housing movement. And we're also looking at trying to create affordable homes using a cooperative housing model. Transportation, I mentioned EVA, and of course, taxi type cooperatives. Yeah, just off the top of my head, and healthcare, education. There are some education related co-ops. Oh, funeral co-ops, childcare co-ops. Literally, there can be a co-op from cradle to grave, right? Childcare is so important. The feds are working with the provinces to initiate programs for more affordable childcare, and co-ops have been trying to do that for years, and it's not clear yet how the co-op model will fit depending on what happens with the federal financing. But funerals in Quebec, they started funeral co-ops because, again, it's inevitable. They cut the price of funerals in half, and almost in some cases in 2/3, and they forced the industry to lower their prices by competition with them. So there's very strong funeral co-ops in Quebec. We're trying to get more in Ontario. The only ones that exist now are in Sudbury and in Ottawa, but we should have them all over the place, because again, it's a necessary service. So why should the big corporations only benefit from that?
Great. Yeah, and then just to clarify, Jim mentioned at the bottom here, yes, he meant different organizations. I think those different industries, have you seen an example of them all coming together under one co-op umbrella?
Clarify for me, what do you mean by that?
We'll get Jim to offer some extra clarification for us, if
Guys,
you can.
you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was having a little trouble with internet, so I thought chatting might be a better way. For instance, in Ontario, there's been a formation of Ontario health teams, right? And these are organizations, different organizations that are coming together under new legislation to basically own the cradle to grave health and wellness of individuals, right? So hospitals are involved, primary care is involved, community service, food banks, transportation, all these organizations come together. Now, they're supposed to come together under a common governance, and ultimately they will be funded by a single check by the government, ultimately when they get there. Some of these organizations may want to come together as a single entity. I'm wondering if a cooperative model might work for them.
Well, I think that was that you've articulated a great opportunity, because if in a multi-stakeholder fashion, maybe it's about having everybody have a piece of the pie and or a say. And so, yeah, the co-op model provides that opportunity, because otherwise it gets concentrated in large corporations, which their track record in the healthcare field in particular is abysmal.
Yes.
So, you know, I think you've given a great example, and I would love to work with you and talk with you about who and how that's happening, because it needs to happen. You know, we need to improve the services, and the way to do that is to have the various stakeholders represented and a buy-in from everybody rather than a control by one entity.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So we will go to Jennifer next, and then Janine is after Jennifer.
Thank you very much. Here, I'll see if I'm on my phone, so it's a little bit awkward for me. My main question is actually about funding of manufacturing co-ops. So there is a lot of there's a lot of funding out there that is often kind of co-funding or matching funding, sometimes up to millions of dollars. And one of the challenges of beginning something, particularly in a new industry that hasn't been done in Canada before, is funding those initiatives, particularly if they're environmentally friendly and using materials in a different fashion. Is this something that co-ops that are able to take advantage of? Are you able to kind of get your certificates of, I guess, money, I don't remember what it was called, and then have matching funding from some of the, like the agricultural cap funding or the IRAP funding, things like that? Are you able to match those two funding bodies to actually get something done?
Well, interesting to say that. Yeah, no, thank you. Because there is now more awareness of the cooperative model in government, still a long way to go, but in particular in agriculture, where there's a history of large agricultural co-ops like Ailey, Hensel Co-op, Growmark, that they can put together packages and they can apply for the same grants and stimulus that any other corporation can do. So, you know, it isn't, I would like to see more targeted programs for startups, which is what I'm thinking you're suggesting, but we're not there yet. But if there is a particular business product service that you could go to the Jobs and Growth Fund or some of those other programs that you mentioned, and yes, we do qualify. Historically, though, there were programs where co-ops weren't recognized, like Futurepreneur for entrepreneurs. It was only last year that Futurepreneur would actually, if you went to them, three of you, and wanted to start a worker co-op to do whatever, they wouldn't recognize it. Had to be a sole proprietor. So we're making headway, and I hope to see more cooperatively owned businesses, as you mentioned.
Awesome, thank you, Peter. Janine, go ahead.
Hi there. Thanks, Peter, so much for this talk. This has been so fantastic. I probably have a question in here somewhere, but I'm just going to kind of give you a little background on where I'm coming from today and why I was interested in this. I am an Innovation Guelph client presently. I own a company, standard privately owned company in manufacturing and design. What I really want to do is something, and it's funny how much healthcare has come up today. I wasn't really expecting that, but part of my past, I was a personal support worker for an agency for people with special needs, and worked in that field for about 8 years. Never really knew why I worked in that field. It just kind of fell into my lap. And now I really see adults with special needs, what's happening probably everywhere, but I'm really noticing in Ontario, there's a lack of day programming. They're shutting down supported employment. The staff in at least the agency where I worked are very disillusioned, disenfranchised, angry at management. It's a toxic environment for the people that live there, the people that work there. And I want to do something very different. I had no idea that a co-op might be exactly what it should be. I was thinking that I was going to probably sell my company, get a bunch of startup money, start another private company, run this, figure out how to do it all on my own, hire people. So this talk has been really inspiring for me because I see, as several people have touched on, healthcare and social services, you need everybody to be invested. You need everyone to care about the people that work there, live there, every single part of it. So I probably would like to talk to you further, and I've got kind of more specific questions as I kind of go through past the exploratory phase of where I'm at. I don't know if you've got any advice on kind of the first place to start looking, researching, where to go from here.
Well, I would yes, I do, and I would immediately refer you to the DSW worker co-op.
Yeah.
Those 4 or 5 women are dynamite, and or the PSW one out of Peterborough, because they are they're entrepreneurs, and they are they are the beginning, I think, of a growing movement. I'm glad to hear you.
Yeah.
You articulate why it is you want to see change.
Yeah,
and there is a solution.
Definitely, I know the why. Now, I think both of those examples are more focused on in-home, and it wouldn't probably be any different in a congregate living setting
Right.
than in-home. I don't know if Jim's got any insight into that, because it sounds like you know a lot more than I do about the way some of these agencies are functioning together in Ontario anyway.
Yeah, and Janine, feel free to reach out to me as well. Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with you about it, because there's a lot of movement, a lot of opportunity, but more importantly, there's a real need. And I think in the healthcare space, if we're going to really address things, we have to ultimately address an equity position in here, but we also have to get down to the reality that it's 10% of our patients that consume 60% of the bill, right? So if we can begin to really address those in need, we have a huge impact socially and financially, economically in province and Canada. So again, these sorts of things really have to come together, because our healthcare system is so fragmented currently.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, right on too.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Kate has a question in the chat box. Kate says, Janine, you have a great point. She was going to ask if the co-ops of workers would be recognized in the health sector. She's only heard they only support private corps in that getting healthcare coverage paid. So wondering if individual supports person to person is paid.
If I heard what you're saying, I mean, yeah, the fact that they're more in control, they're still having to function with the financial support from the government, and it needs to be improved. But there can be, like the home care associates in New York, where they have grown their model and improved it, made it more efficient, and better serving the clients, as well as better for the employees. So So it can happen, and it sounds like what Jim was saying, that there's a, there is a demand and interest here. We just need to, help develop that and get the government on board. There's so many examples in Italy and France and in England of utilizing a more multi-stakeholder worker supported cooperatives. And yeah, we can just learn from their examples.
So if I could just add to that, it's Jim again, the funding of services for healthcare is very fragmented in Canada and Ontario, I think, and that's what Kate's getting to in the question. So there are certainly self-pay options within the space, and also some of those same services would qualify for services purchased by healthcare entities. And under the Ontario Health Teams, the new legislation, we're going to begin to see them operate more like businesses in terms of healthcare, and they may reach out to the private sector to buy services, because in the end, they're accountable for the outcome. So just a quick example, if I'm taking care of a patient who needs surgery, but it's a 6-month wait time for surgery, but I know from statistics, because I'm accountable for birth to death in my region, that patient's going to visit the ER 3 times in the next 6 months and cost us $125,000. I'm going to send them to Buffalo and get them the surgery if I have to, or I'm going to buy it somewhere if I need to, because in the end, it's cheaper and it's providing better outcomes, and I'm accountable for the whole health system in my region. So Guelph and area Ontario Health Team is just forming now, and this is one of those groups that will be serving us as the Guelph Wellington region people in terms of that. So you're going to begin to see some opportunities for that more in the future. So I think, again, there's some really interesting opportunities for both the private pay type of service that people will acquire for mom and dad if they need it, and also mixing into the publicly funded model as well.
Well, again, Jim, I don't know, and I look forward to having more discussions about it, but if we actually had more preventive healthcare in general, like say the Danish model, where they have nurses, PSWs actually going in a community and being connected to a community and going into homes and keeping people in their homes, providing services, then they don't end up in the hospital under emergency conditions. So yeah. It isn't
right on. That's exactly what this is all about. It's more population health based, and it's about getting ahead of the problem and avoiding the most costliest side of this. It's both costly in terms of us as terms of taxpayers for it, but it's also costly in terms of the life value for the individual who's suffering the illness, right, and the family. So we're trying to shift our system to get ahead of that. The US are doing things around accountable care organizations in that space. So for instance, if you're in a food poor area and you have diabetes, I mean, they're sending you they're sending you healthy food and enrolling you in a fitness class, because in the end, you're preventing them from going into hospital, right? So this is the change that's happening. European, westernized countries are far ahead of us, but it's happening here in Canada and in the US as well.
Right on.
Wonderful. Do we have any more questions for Peter or the greater group? We have a couple
comments.
minutes
I'd love
left.
to hear if there's some other, like Janine, promoting a particular desire to work in an area and develop something. If there's any other comments or ideas, or why aren't we doing this? If there's some other example, please let us hear.
No, I don't see any hands. Jennifer says, thank you. You've really helped in the chat box there, Peter. As have a couple other people. They're very thankful.
One of the ones, again, there's so many you can do research on, but a really progressive group, Arctic co-ops. It's a collection of all kinds of different services in the north that they have tourism, they have hotels, they have transportation, they have food delivery. And and maybe you heard, the old Hudson's Bay company that was the original, provider, exploiter of the North, now has been eclipsed by almost Arctic Co-op and people who have controlling their own services and development. A very, very successful set of co-ops in the North. And there's a similar one in Quebec, and I can't remember the French name of it, but they've also developed services, and Indigenous people are also in control of several of their co-ops that serve, first service is to the members, to the people, not to the corporation shareholders.
Awesome. There have been a couple of people that have mentioned they'd like to get connected with you. Peter, are you open to connections via email to a couple of our attendees today?
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, we're here. We're actually a nonprofit, in quotes, not-for-profit cooperative. And we're a co-op of co-ops. So our members are all the large ones that I mentioned, plus all the small ones. So we're a mixture, and my job is to help start co-ops and support them. We do education programs. I mentioned we do that. So yeah, please get in touch. That's our raison d'etre.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Well, I'm happy to make some warm introductions via email for people who would like to get connected to Peter. I see Jennifer's comment here. There is another question in the chat box here. Just before everyone hops off though, we will get to this question. I'll be sending out a recording of this session and Peter's slides, which will include all of his links that he's included in his slides on Thursday of this week. It takes us a couple days to process our recording. So you'll have his contact information, but you're welcome to email me prior if you'd like, but I will make the connections for everybody who's messaged me and mentioned it. Question for you, Peter, is can you clarify a bit how the profit sharing works?
Different ways. One of the easiest one and unique one is a patronage type of return. So best example would say be like a farmer co-op where, if you purchased from the co-op, thousands of dollars of various, grains or fertilizers or whatever. And then I went in, I was a member, but I only purchased a small amount of product from the store, say. At the end of the year, when and hopefully there is a profit, then the percentage, the person who shopped more would get a similar percentage, but because it's based on service that you've used, so I would get less, they would get more. That's one way. Wages obviously are another way that people benefit, and also shares. If there happens to be a share structure that there's a dividend paid on those shares. So traditional to many other businesses. So patronage, dividends, salaries, those are similar ways that any business is paid. It's just that I believe in the co-op, it's more open and transparent, and the control again is one member, one vote.
Awesome. Any more questions for Peter? Comments? No. So thanks everyone for coming today. Peter, thank you so much for coming. We're getting some thank yous in the chat now, and sharing with us all of your knowledge on co-ops, and offering to connect with people. Thank you, Penny and Roxanne from Sign Language Interpreting Associates Ottawa, for providing interpretation today. I'm just going to quickly pop the feedback link in the chat today. Our monthly toolkit Tuesdays are based on participant feedback for the most part. So if there's a topic that you haven't heard of us speak about yet, or you can't find a resource in the community, we are happy to do the best we can to bring that to you via our Toolkit Tuesdays. So please fill out our feedback today for both us and Peter, and offer some suggestions for our upcoming Toolkit Tuesdays. Our next Toolkit will be on Tuesday, December 14th. It's 1 week earlier than usual, just to make sure that as many people can come as possible due to the holiday season in December. So same time, same place, Zoom, 1:30 p.m. And otherwise, I would just like to quickly thank our sponsors that make our Toolkit Tuesdays possible. So EY Canada, ISU Software Corp, Morexis, Miller Thompson, OKR Financial, Reese Informatica, Invest in Guelph, and BDO. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring you these awesome Toolkit Tuesdays every month. Otherwise, I am going to say goodbye. Again, thank you, Peter, Penny, Roxanne. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Slides and recording will go out on Thursday, and I am here if you have any more questions. Yeah, thank you very much.